What's going on, guys? Today we're going to talk about the difference between high reps versus low reps and which one you should be doing to reach the goals that you're trying to accomplish. So we'll start with low reps and the pros and cons of low reps. So with low repetitions, and I would categorize low reps being between 1 rep max and 5 repetitions. With that, you're going to want to wait anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes in between sets for those to allow your body to recoup. When you train in the low rep ranges, what you're really training is you have a couple different metabolic processes in the body. One pathway to producing energy is what's called the phosphocreatine, or using ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That is done essentially without oxygen. You're utilizing all of these different processes all at the same time, but it just depends on the emphasis that your body is using, if that makes sense. So when you train in low reps, you're really taxing the phosphate pathway, and this is where creatine helps a lot because it lends its phosphate molecule to be uptook to create ATP from ADP. It's a really scientific answer, but essentially you're training in the low rep ranges, you're training the ATP pathways. On top of that, you will have muscle breakdown for sure if you're lifting heavy, but one of the benefits of lifting heavy, especially with heavy compound movements, is you are developing a stronger central nervous system. Because when you are exploding in an explosive fashion and doing the lower reps, what you're really training is your nervous system to contract that muscle harder and faster and utilizing more of the muscle. Versus the higher rep ranges, when you're doing more isolated work and you're filling the muscle with blood and you're taxing the different pathways with that, you aren't getting as much of a central nervous system stimulus. However, I've found when you're doing rep ranges of 6 to 12 or so, especially if you're doing isolation work and really holding the squeeze and doing long eccentric movements, that you can develop a better mind-muscle connection, so you can really activate those muscles a little bit more, but it's not as taxing on your central nervous system. If you've ever lifted heavy, especially consistently, so if you did like 6 days a week of heavy compound movements, what I found is that my muscles themselves, my body's sore, but a huge thing is that I just kind of feel foggy. And that's because your brain is working so hard to contract those muscles all at the same time. You're putting a heavier stress on your central nervous system versus the muscles themselves. Now, when you train from 6 reps to 12 reps, this is when you are really dealing with the lactic acid that I talked about in my previous video, or maybe it was Monday's video, I can't remember. Lactic acid is a byproduct of utilizing oxygen to convert glucose into energy. And so with that byproduct, that's when you get the burning feeling, is from the lactic acid. Your body's really good at cycling that through and getting rid of that byproduct so that it's not being harmful into the muscle. And so when you have DOMs, it's actually microfiber tears versus lactic acid in your muscle. It's a common misconception. But with the higher rep ranges, especially if you are doing a lot of time under tension, so you're doing slow negatives, maybe holding the squeeze or the isolation, what you're doing is you're taxing the muscle itself and the muscle fibers, and you're breaking those down even further. Another thing you're doing is you're filling the muscle with blood, and with more blood comes more nutrients and more oxygen. And with those, you get a bigger, more showy muscle because it's a lot more filled. And that's what we call the pump. Arnold loved the pump so much. But I honestly would recommend training both ways. Obviously, emphasize one a little bit more depending on what you're going for. If you're a beginner and haven't really done anything, I would focus on heavy compound movements in the I would do like a set of 5 sets of 5 for heavy compound movements, and then maybe isolation exercises for 3 or 4 sets of 8. But unless you are training for a marathon, or unless, a lot of women will do 12 to 15 to 20 reps with light weight and never really even feel a burn or anything like that, because they don't want to become bulky, or they think that, low weight, high reps will tone. But all toning really means is having lower body fat and higher muscle, or higher levels of muscle, or more muscle mass, having that good balance of muscle to body fat. That's what's called tone. And so no exercise that you do can specifically, so if I want to lose fat on my triceps, let's say, and spot reduce, there's no exercise that you can do to do that. If I go and do tons of tricep extensions or close grip bench, that's going to build the muscle under there, but you can't reduce fat in any specific area. You can only be in a calorie deficit, which then that will reduce your overall fat, but it's just your genetics that will take care of where you're actually seeing that fat. But you can do things such as a 5x5, I think is a great beginner's program, and then start adding in isolation exercises to kind of topple off the physique. But the thing is that you need to have a solid base. So whether you're a guy just starting out or a girl just starting out, and you're wondering what program to start with a 5x5. Do that for a few months, heavy compound movements for 5 sets of 5 with maybe a 1 to 2 minute rest in between. After you have a solid foundation of a base of muscle, then start working into the 6 to 8 rep ranges, up to the 10. Then you can start, everybody starts in and goes, 3 sets of 10 is standard, but they don't have a solid foundation of muscle to begin with. So yeah, start with a 5x5, move into the higher rep ranges. You can even do a program, and I love working in a pyramid. So you start with a heavy exercise. So let's do rows, for example. So you row, maybe you start at 150 pounds and you do 5 reps, and that hits your failure. Well, now you drop it to 125 or 120, and now you're able to do 7 to 8 reps, and you pound that out. Then you rest a little bit. Then you move it to 95 pounds and you pound that out, and you're able to do 12 reps, and then maybe even up to 15, and then you can pyramid back down. So having a solid foundation of muscle will be really, really beneficial for you, so that then when you move into the higher rep ranges and you're contracting, there's actually muscle there for the blood to flow through. Without that, it's not going to be as efficient as you want it to be. But there is something to say about utilizing the negatives. So lots of people focus on how much you're able to lift in the concentric portion, which is let's say with a bench press, which is actually pressing the motion up, pressing the weight up, or a squat, it's the standing up. Then there's the isometric hold, which is when the muscle is producing, the muscle's contraction, but no movement is happening. This is like at the top of a bicep curl when you're really, really squeezing. That's the isometric portion. And then the lowering of the weight, or the lowering of the squat, or lowering of the bench press, is the eccentric portion. I would say even when you're lifting heavy for 5 sets of 5, you should always have about a 2-second negative. And the reason this is it's going to develop a better mind-muscle connection. It's going to tear the muscle down even more. It's going to fill the muscles with blood. And studies have shown that when focusing on the negatives, it actually improves the amount of weight that you're able to produce, or the amount of force you're able to produce in the concentric portion. So give that a shot. I hope I shed a little bit of information on there, you know, high reps versus low reps. But women out there, don't be afraid to lift heavy. Honestly, you don't have the testosterone necessary to get big and bulky like you think, especially if you're in a calorie deficit. Physiologically, there's no way that can happen. So make sure that you are lifting heavy, prioritize heavy compound movements over your cardio. Do a little bit of cardio at the end and then be in a calorie deficit, and there's no way you can get bulky. But what will happen is you'll build muscle and you'll get a lot stronger and more functional. So I hope I helped. Check you guys tomorrow. Thanks.